This episode is brought to you by the Founders Club, the premier community for founders pursuing excellence in the mind, body, and of course, business. The club is home to over 750 founders who are actively building stronger companies and better lives together. Through curated masterminds, destination retreats, and private events, members gain access to world-class insights, connections, and experiences designed to help them perform at the highest level. So the average founder in the club is doing between $5 and $50 million a year in revenue. So if you're ready to surround yourself with like-minded entrepreneurs who push you to grow and excel in every area of life, visit foundersclubofficial.com and apply to become a member today. Mr. Armstrong Williams from DC. Thank you, my brother, for coming to Miami and doing this on the Founder to Founder podcast. I don't know anyone else that would really, in a flash of a moment, just say yes. And I know that you haven't been on the other side of the microphone, but probably in a really long time, if not ever.
It's my first podcast.
Wow. Today's episode, I think for everybody listening, is not only going to be really inspiring, but having gotten to know you over the last few years, my good friend Landon, who actually introduced us, we have an inside joke and say, Armstrong can say one sentence and we can talk about it for weeks, trying to decipher the riddle, because there's so much wisdom. And everyone that's listening today, I think, is not only going to be inspired, but I think I'm personally probably going to listen to this episode a few times of what's to come to it. But let's get right into it. A lot of the listeners of this podcast are incredible entrepreneurs. Many of them members of the club, many of them aspiring members. They want to go out into the world. They want to build something special. You've certainly done that. But a big thing I say is that entrepreneurship is not something that just falls from the sky. It's oftentimes developed by the hard lessons that we learned in our journey, and they manifest into this beautiful thing. And I want to kind of go back into your youth a little bit and hear a little bit about your upbringing. I know one of 10 children. How did your youth, tobacco farm, those lessons you learned, how important were they for you now as you've went on into the world and started to build businesses?
Well, thank you for extending the invite to join you. Well, growing up in South Carolina during the 70s and 80s, in and of itself, when you think about what was going on at that time in our history, Nixon in China, Vietnam, the uprisings in Russia, the strife that was going on in the Middle East. The economy was tinkering. America's about to get off the gold standard. There's so many things that were going on in terms of, there was still strife with civil rights in some of the major cities in our country. Minority women and blacks were still fighting for equal rights, fighting for dignity, fighting for respect. And why do I bring those things up? Because of all those things that were going on, my parents during that period shielded us from the ugliness of life. When people speak of racism, when they talk about the white man as the boogeyman, my parents always found the silver lining in life. My parents believed this. We had a huge estate, a farm, which we had to work. My father always believed that if you learn work ethic, you learn discipline, sacrifice, routine, faith in God, that no matter what the circumstances are in the world, if you have those basic skills, you can conquer anything. And I remember during the time of the 70s and the 80s when Strom Thurmond was a very powerful person. He was a United States Senator, but they said he was a segregationist. He was a racist. But I'll never forget my father when I was in high school, about to graduate and was thinking about college. My father, who's very wise and who's my best friend, and even though he's deceased today, his words and wisdom still lives on within me. That part will never die. And so my father said to me, he said, the farm is not going to always be successful. Things will change, and you got to move on to another paradigm shift and find your way in the world. He said, I want you to meet Strom Thurmond. And so I remember in the middle of our crop, because my father realized that the senator was speaking at the Dry Dock Seafood Hut in Mullins, South Carolina. And when we arrived and we sort of had to dress up and put on our best attire, the function was over and Senator Thurmond was walking out, and he recognized my father. And my father said, I want to introduce you to my boy. Now, you don't say boy today. People feel offended if you refer to somebody as a boy. But back then, my parents referred to this as that boy. And I'll never forget when Senator Thurmond extended his hand to shake him out. I said, oh, when I was a kid, look, I said, oh, I hear you're a racist. I hear you're the biggest racist. I actually thought my father was going to smack me. But Senator Thurmond laughed, and he says, well, I tell you what, young man, because I know your father's a fine man, you send me your resume, and when you graduate from high school and you start college, I want you to come to Washington, D.C. and intern for me in my office, and you find out, and you determine whether I'm a racist or not. And
Wow.
and so that was a very pivotal moment.
How old were you at the time?
17.
Wow.
It's a very pivotal moment in my life because I'll never forget when I graduated from high school and went on to college. Let me tell you something. If you know anything about farm and cropping and picking tobacco and that sweltering heat, I mean, it's the toughest kind of work. And, I dreaded the summers on the farm. And I'll never forget my father saying to me, he said, boy, the only way you're going to avoid being on this farm slugging that tobacco, the senator offered you an internship. If you go and work for him, I'll give you the summers off. And boy, I'm telling you, I went back to him and found that piece of paper and reached out to him. And I'll never forget this person by the name of Holly Johnson, who was his secretary, answered the phone. And sure enough, she remembered me. And I worked for the senator during my college days. And it was this senator and my working with him, learning legislation, learning how to write, learning the political landscape. And when I first went to Washington, remember, I'd never been out of South Carolina. So when I saw Washington, D.C., especially when I stood on the steps of the Capitol, it was like paradise. I've never seen anything like it before. I always knew as a kid, this is the place I want to come back and live and build my life. So that childhood and my parents' influence and my father having vision, realizing that Strom Thurmond could be a mentor for me, to be the change agent in my life, paid off very well because I listened.
That's incredible. I find it always so interesting how in almost everyone's journey, there's one or two like catalysts, people that extend their arm out in a way and see something in you that maybe you didn't even see in yourself at that time and kind of give you an olive branch to take it. And you did. And for you, it was your father kind of pushing you forward and saying, hey, you want to get off this farm?
Yeah.
You better go and do that. You sent me an article the other day. And I'm going to paraphrase, and it was, you might not even remember it because you sent me a lot of articles. And you sent me an article where I believe it was a quote, maybe from George Washington. Do you believe it?
Abraham Lincoln.
Abraham Lincoln. And it was
about voting.
And also about not being ready for the opportunity when it comes to you.
I will prepare myself. And when the time comes, I will be ready.
And what I'm hearing a lot is like, your upbringing on the farm is actually, in a way, preparing yourself, the ability to have routine, faith in God, show up every day, work hard even when you don't want to, dirt under your fingernails, to then when this opportunity comes to go out and was it like an internship or take an internship,
non-paid,
definitely not paid,
non-paid,
but the payment was don't have to work in the sun all day.
No, the payment was the experience, learning about yourself through others. Sometimes when you're young, you're short-sighted. You cannot even realize the opportunities and what life has in store for you because you're so naive. And naivety is sometimes a good thing because it forces you to take certain risks that are worthwhile, that sort of breathes life into you for the journey. Because my relationship with Strom Thurmond is still alive and well with me today. The relationships, the people that he introduced me to. And then I had to deal with the fact of, you hear these stories today, particularly if you're an American who happen to be African-American, and if you embrace these old Southern senators, if you embrace these Republicans, you have no identity of your own, you're a sellout, you betrayed your race. But fortunately for me, as a boy, I experienced that early on as a teenager. That people thought the mere fact that I would work for Strom Thurmond was a betrayal. The mere fact that I would call him a mentor was insulting. And I'll never forget this. When I first probably arrived in Washington, D.C., I was prepared for it, because my father always taught us, it doesn't matter what people call you. What matters is you know who you are. And you only answer to who you are, not as people try to define who you are. My parents always gave us a sense of real self-esteem, real self-worth. And I didn't grow up, and I did not come from those rags, the richest stories, the poverty, where you could look through the roof and it's raining and you could look down and you could see the chickens. My parents were upper middle class. And so my going to college, my parents could afford to pay for my 4 years. I had no debt. I come from an upper middle class family where we had to read, go to the library, we traveled, we had different experiences, and my parents were very open-minded. And the other issue with my father, because he only had a 6th grade education, it was frowned upon in my community. And when my father wanted to be on the school board of education, the community pushed back against him because they said he didn't have the education nor the sophistication. And so seeing all those things through my father made me want to have the best grades in high school, the best grades in college, because I wanted to show these people that what you did to my father, I would make sure that I legitimize everything that my father believed in. So I had an impetus to right the wrongs of my father. So all the things that we see today that happening when it comes to the politics and these labels and who we think people are, because I got to tell you this story. It's the best story with my family. I don't tell this story often. I remember when my father first bought the farm. He bought the farm in the 40s. He tells this story. He could not buy the farm as a black man because at that time they would not sell blacks land. So he had to find this guy, Mr. Buckingham Davis, who was an old Jewish guy, really had a liking to my father. And he said to my father, James, I really believe in you. I know you don't want your kids growing up in working on some sharecropper's farm. And so what I want to do, because I know you're a man of your word, I will front for you and buy the farm for you. But let me just do this for you. And so when Mr. Davis bought the farm from my father, when they finally announced at the auction who would the deed, the name that it was being, he announced my father. Whites were upset with him because they felt he was too big for his britches. And the blacks in the community were upset with him because they felt he did not know his place, because he was trying to be better than they were. But as a child watching all this, it gave me a clear understanding of the kind of world and the kind of strife that people face, whether they're educated, uneducated, or whatever. So it's sort of in my mind, I always said, there's no way I'm going to go to college and not get the best grades. For what my parents had to sacrifice, I'm going to always be the best person that I can be, because I always realized whatever I am in life, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, will always reflect back on my parents and what they poured into us. And so this story is, once my father had bought the farm, this was in the 70s, I'll never forget, we were awakened one morning to where our red barn was burned down. And as you could see 3 white men with the gas canister walking away from the barn, they literally burned my father's horse farm, all the storages, burned it down out of jealousy, and call it whatever you want to. And I'll never forget my other brother, Jimmy, saying to my father, and you still believe in this white man, and they keep putting their foot on your neck, we can never get a break. And my father, in the midst of his loss, in the midst of his grief, he said, listen, those were not 3 white men. Those were 3 individuals filled with hatred and contempt. Never judge people as groups. Judge them as individuals. Those 3 individuals are not representation of all white people in America. That was profound for me. So I grew up understanding that people don't commit crimes or commit hatred acts as a group. It's an individual and what's in their heart. So I always grew up not judging a book by what I see. I extend my hand and I say, hey, my name is Armstrong Williams. Let's get to know each other. So I base my judgment of people based on character, based on their word, and how we interact. And it doesn't matter to me what your past is and what you may have had in other relationships, because I do believe that people can evolve and be better. You may have a past as a criminal. It doesn't matter to me. I meet you where you are. And what matters to me is how that relationship grows with us together, not about your past, because you got to always give hope that there's redemption in everybody. So I don't hold on to someone's past. I take them at their word, no different than our friendship. Whether we're in Paris, whether we're in Abu Dhabi at Formula One, whether we're at the inauguration, it's not because of your ethnicity or my ethnicity. It's because we're human beings. And basically, we want the same thing: loyalty, trust, somebody to believe in us, and we grow ourselves together. It's just that simple.
What's up, Founder to Founder fam? I just want to quickly pause here and thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of this journey. Starting a podcast is no joke, and the fact that hundreds of you listen every single week means the world to us. We want to continue to bring better and different and unique conversations to you to give you the most amount of value. Our only ask is that if you enjoy the pod, to please just share it with a friend, and most importantly, leave a comment, DM us, give us any sort of feedback. This entire production is for you, so if we can make it just 1% better, we will. We love you all. All right, let's get back into the pod. It's so profound. One thing I admire so much about what you're sharing right now is your connection to your family. And for me, the way I grew up, not with 10, but with 5 boys. And we've actually interviewed my mother on the Armstrong Williams show. And very similar, a lot of the lessons that I've carried and I've learned were ones that I just watched in real time as a kid, seeing my parents go through just horrible situations, and the conclusions that I kind of draw from that propelled me and gave me direction with how I wanted to live my life. And for me, it wasn't the grades. It was like, I just didn't want to be broke. So I was like, I got to go make money because I don't want to have that happen to me, watch my parents go through that. One thing I admire so much about you is how much you've learned and how much respect you give back to your family. And which is why I'm so happy you shared about your father. But also, as you went on and built your business, you used your parents, your family's names in the creation of your business.
Yeah, Howard Stirk.
And that is so meaningful because you didn't put Armstrong Williams or AEW. You used your family's names to develop the company. When did you decide to then go out on your own and become an entrepreneur? Talk me through that journey.
Now this, never in my life, growing up as a kid, in high school, in college, that I ever think about being an entrepreneur, being a business owner. It was never. I actually thought that I would be a writer, publish books, and run for office. I always saw my place in America in politics, and I liked that office, but also being a writer because I enjoyed writing. And then the other thing too, which I can relate to, my parents, when I first was in Washington, D.C., found me a place to live, the same building I'm in now. They paid the first few months of rent, gave me money. So I never really had to make decisions based on money. So my parents were always there. They had my back, wanted me to get good grades. They wanted me to sort of get my feet wet in this new job because Senator Thurmond, after I interned with him, got me a position at the Department of Agriculture and Animal Plant Health and Inspection Services, known as APHIS. But I'll never forget something that my father said to me. He said, your other brothers are coming along. I was a middle child. And he said, the kinds of things that we were able to do for you in terms of the stipends and the money and the support, that's going to be cut off. He said, I have prepared you for life. And then my dad said something to me that was absolutely crazy. I thought he had lost his mind. He said, because whether you like it or not, son, you're an entrepreneur. I said, what? An entrepreneur? Because when we were growing up, I did take care of the books for the family farm. I paid the bills. I learned how to do the taxes, but I never saw that as business. I saw that as filling a void that my parents needed at the time. But my father said to me that I was an entrepreneur. But he said, you've got 60 days and you're on your own. No more money from...
How old were you at the time?
21.
So you're 21,
Yeah,
that's it.
21.
You're cut off.
21. But there was something my father taught us, though, and this also goes back to entrepreneurship. My father started teaching us this when we were about 15 or 16. He always called it, because we always sort of squirrels out, grabbing little nuts and storing them away. My father always liked that concept. He said, son, you got to always, because my parents, when we did work on the farm, my parents paid us a stipend. And so my father said, you should always squirrel away. He said, no matter how much money we pay you for working on the farm, you selling fish baits, because there are a lot of things that we would do to make extra money. My father said, always take 20% of that and put it away. And put it away. Always. He said, no matter what, squirrel away, squirrel away. And so my daddy said, I don't care if I give you 10 cents, put 2 cents away. Because he put it in such a way, because 2 cents didn't seem like a big deal. If I give you $10, put $2 away. If I give you $100, put $20 away. And so I like that concept. And he said the other thing about squirreling away, don't tell your brothers, don't tell your friends that you've got money, because if people feel you got extra money, it burns. They want that money. They're going to find something to spend it on. And when they have problems, you're the first person they're going to come to. He said, so keep that quiet. So since I was 15 or 16 years old, every time I would make money, whether it was on the farm, whether it was working finally with Senator Thurmond, working in APHIS, I would always squirrel away 20%. And so when my father finally, and I was doing that, so when my father said, it was called like a rainy day fund. My father always said, don't ever, no matter what's going on, do not access that money. I don't care how much you think you're struggling financially, do not access that money. And you know, my father spoke, it was like Moses. It was to me, it was.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, the end of that 2 months did come. And I realized, you know, I don't want to go into my rainy day fund. Because listen, I wasn't making a lot of money. It was no big deal because I had the backing of my parents. But then, you know, something really happened. I said, my father said, I'm an entrepreneur. How do I discover that? How do I know I'm an entrepreneur? How do I know, you know, just because your father says something, but if you hear about the struggle financially, what's the reality is? And I'll never forget a young man by the name of Kevin Johnson. We're still buddies today. We're at a reception somewhere. And plus, I had this other thing going on. I was the youngest presidential appointee in U.S. history. The Reagan administration had appointed me to the Department of Agriculture. And you know, you get a little ego. You're working for the President of the United States, appointed by the President of the United States. And so this young man approached me about, and during that time, it was multi-level marketing. That was a hot thing going on.
Yeah, MLMs.
MLM,
oh no.
Herbalife,
yeah,
Amway,
all the pyramid schemes.
And so this brother was into the pyramid scheme. But his pyramid scheme was diet, Dick Gregory's Bahamian diet. And this guy says, I know you're a presidential appointee, but man, you should get involved with this pyramid because you got the personality, you can make a lot of money. I said, I wouldn't dare find myself selling cans and pitching no pyramid. But then I talked to my father. He said something. I keep going back to my father. Of course, my mother was the moral leader in the house, but my father was my man. He said, son, as long as it's moral, legal, and ethical, and you're making an honest living, forget about your status as a presidential appointment. You don't want to be a poor presidential appointee. He said, so it's an opportunity. He said, and it's not really about the opportunity. Learn about yourself, because you've never unleashed anything about you to show that what you can do in the marketplace. I said, well, you know, it's true. So I went to Baltimore, sat in on the meeting. They gave the manual, and I was pretty good at math. I must admit, I was pretty good at numbers. And I read the entire manual, but I found all the loopholes. All the loopholes. The key in these, when they first started out, is find all the loopholes. Yeah. And I found the loopholes. And I'll never forget, my first check was $200. My second check was $6,000. My third check was $16,000. And the fourth check was $42,000.
Wow.
By the time, and listen, I was 22, I was young. Listen, I made crazy money for multi-level marketing.
Wow.
Yes, that's how I got started. But it's what I did with that money at the time. So I'll tell you this story. I don't know. I have to tell you this story. So When I was at the Department of Agriculture, John Block was the secretary, and they really didn't know what to do with me. Whether I should be in congressional affairs or legislative affairs or the secretary's office. So they decided that they would assign me with putting together the Black History Month program, that I would organize, find a speaker for Black History Month. And then during that time, President Reagan was having a lot of issues with his image with the Black community. Well, they say this about every Republican, so that's nothing new under the sun. But I was assigned the task. And I was trying to figure out who I'd bring in as a speaker. But I'll never forget what Senator Thurmond said to me. He said, this is an opportunity for you to find someone to bring in and that could really put you on the map. This could be your introduction to Washington, D.C. And Aaron, I'll never forget this. God bless America. I was up one night watching Entertainment Tonight and saw where Richard Pryor was freebasing cocaine. He was also from California, and how he almost burned half his face off. And they said he lost his career, he lost his credibility. But they said something very interesting as that started, because remember, they didn't have the internet back then. You couldn't do the kind of research that you do today. They said he had never, ever given a straight speech in his life. He had never done anything, and he was so profane and obnoxious. And I said to myself, what if I could get Richard Pryor to come, and understand, Richard Pryor was bigger than David Chappelle and all the big names today. I mean, Richard Pryor is their hero. He was the icon of today, okay? Wow. Just on the same level as a Michael Jackson, Richard Pryor, when it comes to this genre. And I'll never forget, I made 62 calls. And on the 63rd call, his lawyer, Terry Giles, called me. And I said, I have a proposition for you, President Reagan. I added a little yeast. I didn't say to the Department of Agriculture. I said, you know, the White House is looking for the right speaker for Black History Month. And we think Richard Pryor would be ideal. I understand I was only like 24, 25 at the time. I said, I think Richard Pryor would be ideal, and it would help him restore his credibility. And it also will give the Reagans a chance to do something for Black History Month. But then as it began to get more serious, as people realized that it was a serious, that could be serious, that we could bring Richard Pryor in, they said, well, you know what? This could be humiliating. That Reagan, it shows further insults to Blacks in this country, bringing in someone who's so profane. And then I finally had a chance to talk with he and his lawyer, and he promised me he would give a straight speech and use no profanity. But lo and behold, he came in.
Wow.
I had a promise that Ronald Reagan would give a reception to him at the White House, which he did. 250 people were in attendance. And lo and behold, it was a game changer. What he was able to do, was able to do for him, what he was able to do for the administration. And even when the administration was trying to cancel it because they thought Richard Pryor was the wrong selection, Strom Thurmond stood by me as my ally. Said, I believe in this young man. But he told me, if this fails, that I'm fired and out of Washington. I said, that's where I go back to naivety. I was too naive to understand what was at stake and the gravity of this. And because I was so interested in delivering something, got a big deal, Richard Pryor coming in, I couldn't think about the consequences. I had a blind spot, but it worked out for me. I took the risk. And as a result of that, you have to couple that simultaneously with everything else that's going on. At the time, I was still involved with the Dick Gregory Bohemian Diet. But the best part of that, Richard Pryor was wonderful, but the best part was meeting this serial entrepreneur, Terry Giles, who'd owned part of Disney at the time, who'd owned Tile World, several Toyota dealerships around the country. And he was so grateful for what we were able to do with Richard. He said, you come up with $25,000 to invest in Toyota and many of my other portfolios, and I'll make your money grow for you. And then my father also said to me at the same time, they're not making any more real estate. Buy as many properties as you can. So from that and those investing, within 2 years, that portfolio became about $7 million.
Wow. And you're like 27 years old.
Yeah. 2 years came about $7 million. And then a funny thing happened. We started the business, and I'm fast forwarding here. I'll never forget, and this is the important thing. I'm going to come back full circle to Squirrel in a way, what my father did. And I was still put aside 20%. I'll never forget my guy, Ira Hirsch, who's still my accountant today. He started a company with me. I was 30 by this time. And I said to him, we were dealing with some payroll stuff. And he said, I don't know why you keep penny pinching and feeling you need to cut here. He said, man, you're a multimillionaire. I never knew I was a millionaire. I had no idea because I was so busy working. He said, I said, what do you mean I'm a multimillionaire? And then he talked about what we were able to do. But the most important thing, he said, you know that money that you've been squirreling away since you were 15 or 16-year-old, that money is $5.2 million now.
Wow.
$5.2 million is what it was. And from that, and I was 26 by this time, and you have to think about the force multiplier effect, which I still squirrel away today. In fact, growing up as a child, even when my father told me I was no longer his good graces of him taking care of my finance, I've never struggled financially in my life. It's crazy, ever. From that, but I was fortunate because most people, when you make that transition to become an entrepreneur, you try this, you try that, it doesn't work out, you fail, didn't have, I mean, and you know, I just said, you know, thank God. Yeah, so that started. Everything was built. And I've had the great pleasure to enjoy having wealth for a very long time. Just a lot of freedom. And it's just like, it's just second nature. And so it all started when I was very young. Strom Thurmond, these relationships, my parents. Some people wait until they're in their 30s to do it. It just happened to me. It was just like magic.
I want to get into the creation of Howard Stirk in a second. But I want to talk a little bit about the psychology of coming into money at a young age. Because many people, like myself, you know, coming into a lot of money at a very young age, it gets really confusing, or it feels that way sometimes. It's like people start coming out of the woodworks. Hey, Arms, I got a deal for you. I got opportunity for you. And at times it become overwhelming. Was there a point, 26, 27, 30 years old now, multimillionaire, taking the risk, seeing the reward, never having really had this big failure? Was there a time where you took a second and asked yourself, you know, is this really who I am, or did I just get lucky here? Was there ever fear that you would kind of lose it all?
Never. I never agonize over those things you're talking about, by the way. Money has never been a burden for me, okay? It's always been I've never felt overwhelmed.
Is that a mindset though? Like, where does that come from?
My mother. Yeah. I wouldn't bring my mother to the conversation because I feel bad I'm not.
Because most people would there's got to be limiting beliefs.
Not at all. Because my mother always said to me that, and my parents, my grandparents said I was special. They thought I would do special things in life. And my mother said, when you're special, it comes with great responsibility. And my mother saw the beginning of my creating the wealth, but my mother always made me realize it didn't belong to me. I only have it through the grace of God. You squander it, you become corrupt with it, you become arrogant with it, you lose it. You have to use your wealth to empower others. So even in my businesses with my employees, those that work within my closest executives, I've always included them and getting a piece of the action, whether it's businesses. I've always taken care of them well with their salaries and their health care. And so they've always been a part of the business, including my family. So it's not enough for me to be wealthy. I got to make those wealthy around me, because you cannot empower others without empowering yourself. Because the people that work for you, that sustain you, that grow the businesses, who are on the front line, they must know that you care about them, you care about their well-being. And part of that well-being is creating financial stability for them. So it has always been in my life that it was not mine. I had to share it. Another thing that my mother taught me, which was so true, and even going to church, you know, the Bible says, I would make your blessings multiply. The more I would give, and the more I would empower, the more my blessings would multiply. So it was never a burden for me, because it was never mine. It was just on loan to me as a gift, something that I may have in some ways I may have earned, but it's just a blessing. And when it's a blessing, you got to use that to empower others. So the millions that we give away every year in the philanthropy that's hidden, that nobody knows about, when you see something like what's happening in Jamaica, where lives have been totally disrupted, or what happens with these hurricanes, where you can go in and make a difference in people's lives, that you know that you use that wealth to make life better for everyone else. You create scholarships for people. You read stories of horror, of tragedy where money can make a difference. You step in. So those things fulfill you because it's not you using. Now I go out, I buy crazy stuff like watches and artwork, but that's okay. I don't apologize for it, but I also, in my own way, give back broadly all around the world. It balances it out.
Yeah, I would say it's something that, I learned from you really early on in our relationship. I would tell Landon all the time, I was like, we just met him and we just had like this amazing connection, but he's so giving. We got to have once in a lifetime experiences, and the doors just like swung open and you were so generous. And a lot of me was like, this might be too good to be true. Like, we just met this man. And I started to realize that everyone in your circle, because it wasn't just us there, we got to meet all these amazing people in your circle, and they were all experiencing the same, and they all were saying the same thing. And you brought so many people along for the ride. And
well, the ride is no fun unless people can enjoy the ride. I mean, it's the problem with the world now. The world has become so greedy and so selfish. People can never have enough. If I never make another dime in my life, my lifestyle and my businesses would not be affected. It's just the way life is. It's only because, and you got to be a cheerful giver. And people don't realize that simple fact. And sometimes you think you have to cheat your way, steal your way, lie your way, deceive your way, but it's all short-lived. I'd rather build it stone by stone over time. So it lasts not a lifetime, but for generations.
Do you think a lot of entrepreneurs in general, or maybe even just younger entrepreneurs, rush? They want it too quickly?
That's not the issue. They just don't have the examples. They don't really understand the importance of morality and making good choices and working, that nothing free, it comes with the price. And that, you got to build a skill set for yourself. You got to build relationships, not relationships you betray because you become greedy. You got to build those relationships for a lifetime, because it's those relationships that empower you to greatness and to financial success, and also peace. I have a lot of peace in my life. I sleep well in life because, it's such a good feeling when you help others. I don't get much of a joy out of buying things for myself. It's not because that's fleeting, but when you help people, that is something that lasts for a lifetime, and money can make a difference. Money, I know the Bible tells us that money is the root of all evil, but money can also be the root for so much good. And I use mine for good, not to have power over people. I put people in uncompromising situations because of the position that I find myself in. I use money for the greater good. There's a greater good.
You speak about relationships a lot. You somehow manage hundreds. There's, I think it's like Dunbar's law. There's a law that says that the average person cannot maintain more than 150 active relationships. I think you break that law because you have so many relationships. And I'll bring back Landon again. We talk about it all the time. We have a community of founders. So I've got hundreds of relationships, but nobody manages relationships better than you. You're always checking in with hundreds of people. You're always keeping people in the loop. And it's something that is not only inspiring, but I also think that many entrepreneurs undervalue the power of having relationships over a long period of time. We all see money grow in the market, right? Like compounding, rule of 72, et cetera. You mentioned it earlier, you put some money aside, 20%, before you know it, became a significant amount of money. Relationships are very similar. They compound over a long period of time. And you just do that so well. Your ability to hold people in your circle for a long period of time. Talk about just how important that is to you and how it's kind of paid off over the years, your ability to maintain those strong relationships with some of the most powerful people in the world, but with everybody.
You have to prioritize what's important to you. The beauty of technology today, especially when it comes to texting, what I do, I'm gonna give up a secret here, okay? But it's the truth. What I do, sometimes at the end of every 2 weeks, I go through every text on my phone. I said, oh, wow, I haven't talked to Melissa in 6 months. I'll just say, how are you doing? Thinking about you. I keep going. Wow, I haven't talked to Bridget in a year, since 2024. I have an article that I've written. I cut and paste it, send it to them. And I do that. That's the great thing about texting. You can do that also in WhatsApp, but in texting, and then they'll write back, oh, wow, Armstrong, out of all people, I just saw you on such and such. How nice. It's easy because technology makes it so easy. And you understand exactly what I'm saying. It makes it so simple. And then here's the other thing. This is what's so deep about God, is that sometimes, and this happens to all of us, I am out, and my friend Angela, who's just was so heavy in my spirit. Now, sometimes if you don't deal with it, then you forget it. And whatever I'm doing, I said, Liz, I got to send Angela a message. Something's wrong. And I write a message. And I said, are you all right? And she'll write back and say, this is crazy. I just came out of chemotherapy. It happens all the time. Wow. It's that when the Spirit lays something heavy on your heart, you just got to move. You got to react to it. You got to respond to it. And so it's not just me. It's something, because no matter what it is, whether it's a friendship, we have a connection. If we spend time together, there's a connection. Just like I tell people all the time, they have sex with all these people. There's a part of you that goes with that. It can never leave you. There's something that's there that is left. They take a part of you. That's why I say give yourself to people that has real meaning in your life, because you don't realize they take something from you that you can never get back. So when you meet people, there's a DNA that's left. And it can come to you full force. And so many times people have come to me, even people that I've had issues with. And sometimes I don't want to check in with them because they may have violated something, not often, but sometimes I said, I got to be able to forgive. If this person is heavy on my heart, let me just check in to make sure they're okay. So it happens to us all. There's nothing that's secretive about staying in touch with people. It's just that with technology now, you can do it so quick. And then another thing I do sometimes, especially I have a lot of older people in my life who are over 80 years old. And what I do with them, I write notes on cards. If I'm on an airplane, I'm writing letters. If I'm sitting at the terminal with the airplane, I'm writing notes, and I'm licking the envelope and telling somebody to take that and drop it into the mailbox. It's however you use time. I never, ever, I take advantage of every waking moment I have, whether it's writing a letter, whether it's sending a note, whether it's writing an essay. We don't realize, I've never said in my life that I have more time during the day. I have more than enough time in the 24 hours. It's just how you manage it. I wake up, let's start this way. I'm in bed around 5:30 p.m. or 6 p.m. every night, Sunday through Thursday. I wake up literally at 3:15. I start getting dressed at 3:30. I start running at 3:38. I'm finished within about 47 minutes. But before I do that, the reason why it takes a little break to start running, I have to do my prayers and I have to do my meditations. Then I run. I'm in the office. I've got to do my mornings where I go out and do my content. And then when I'm sitting there, I'm either writing letters, I'm doing notes, I'm reading contracts. I use every month, because you know why? By the time 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock rolls around in my office, I'm exhausted. There is nothing left in my tank. That's why very few people will ever tell you they've talked to me after 5 p.m. during the day. You don't talk to me you talk to me early in the morning. After 3:30 a.m., that's when I function. My body, I must have 9 hours of sleep. I've never in my life tasted any kind of alcoholic beverage, beer, wine, ever. I've never smoked any kind of cigarette, ever been exposed to any kind of drugs. And I've never used one word of profanity, ever in my life. Think about it. Because I speak English, because I think profanity is profane. It poisons the soul. It takes away from those gifts where you can connect with people that may be suffering. So I like to keep my soul clear. I like to keep it clean. And it's not because of me that I've not done those things. It's because of my parents. Because those are the examples that they set for me. So I'm always in my right frame of mind, because those are the things I choose to do to keep my body healthy, keep it wealthy, keep it stealthy, and keep it disciplined. It's about what you do to your body. What you intake is exactly what it will give you.
Mind, body, and business.
Mind, body, and business. That's exactly right.
Wow. Wow. I love it. Arms. The way you go about everything is really not only inspiring, but it also shows like that you've been able to maintain this consistency over a long period of time. You're around 30 years old now, I'm bringing it back, and you're venturing into media, politics. Talk to me about you starting, was it HSM is the acronym?
HSH.
HSH. Talk to me about HSH. How does this start for you? Now, I believe you're one of the largest minority media companies in the country.
Television stations, yes.
Television stations, yes. Paper routes now.
Yeah. The Baltimore Sun.
It's no joke. You know, you once told me that you're like one of the voices, one of the key voices in America. It carries a lot of power, a tremendous amount of responsibility. Tell me about the beginning of that, getting into that, what that looked like.
Listen, I don't know. I used to write editorials for Newsweek, Time, the Wall Street Journal, Essence Magazine, Ebony Magazine. I have such a history as a writer for major publications. The Jerusalem Post.
Really?
Yes. I wrote a syndicated column for USA Today for 5 years running.
Wow.
So everything started, when I tell you in the free, because I read books, I read 2 books a week. I am a voracious reader. I love reading. And so I would write, and from my writings is what started my going on TV, my doing commentary, because I would write. But here's the other thing. If somebody had told me, it's been about, 16 years since I've owned network television stations, that I would be owning television stations, I would have thought it was a joke. Never in my life could I have imagined that I could own an NBC in Las Vegas, NBC in Flint, Michigan, ABC in Myrtle Beach, ABC in Birmingham, Alabama. It was not even something I ever thought about. But what happened was, and this is what happened was, my boy, this is my brother, David Smith, is my brother, who owns Sinclair Broadcasting, the largest producer of content and local news in the country.
Yeah,
over
massive.
200, massive, over 200 network stations. I've been doing commentary for them, and we get along. Everything's about relationships. Listen, let me tell you, in my business relationships, and I don't have many business partners. David and I are partners in the newspaper. He was not my partner in the television business, but he was the reason why I'm in the television business. And we just got to get along with people. People think it's normal when you have conflict and drama. That's not normal to me. My whole life, I get along with people. I don't have drama and conflict. You are who you are. You tell people what you believe, whether they like it or not, because people should be able to deal with the truth. And then you work these things out. I don't like conflict. I don't like drama. I don't want women in my life. It's everything about drama and complaining, because that poisons the soul. I don't want that. You go to somebody else. That's not for me. I cannot have this bickering and this complaint. I can't have it. Doesn't work for my spirit. But anyhow, David, Aaron, it's a crazy conversation. So about 16 or something years ago, he said, I want to meet with you. I said, okay. And he said, have you ever thought about owning network television station? I said, get out of here. That has to be crazy expensive. He said they're $40 and $50 million a pop. I said, that's crazy money. He said, but you can afford it. I'm looking for somebody that wants to get in the television industry, and they've got to put a lot of money down. I said, I would never spend my money on something like that, ever. But here's the thing. I had the money. Everything starts. You can have opportunities presented to you in the marketplace, but if you don't have the money, it's meaningless. Just so happened, in the All Britain, was an All Britain TV deal that went before the FCC. And in that All Britain deal, there was a station in Myrtle Beach. And David came back to me 2 years later. He said, I think I have an opportunity where you won't say no. I'm going to get you in the TV business. And I said, really? He said, because you have great content, you've got a brand. Imagine if you're on television. He said, guess what? The television station that I grew up on with my family watching in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, was up for sale. He said, how would you like to be the owner of the television station that your parents and all your community grew up watching? I said, man, I'm telling you. I said, wow, no way. He said, absolutely. you have a chance to buy it. Do you want it? I did not equivocate. I said, doesn't matter the price, I'll buy it. And that's how I started. He said, but you just can't have one. Why don't you also buy WEYI, Channel 25, NBC in Flint, Michigan? I said, yeah, I like twins. I said, yeah. I said, sure. Sure. And that's how it all began.
And what did that cost you, like, out the gates?
These stations, I just told you what they cost.
Each one is $50 million bucks?
They're expensive. These stations are expensive.
Wow.
Yes, unprecedented. It's just like buying a sports franchise.
Wow.
Which I've had opportunities to do. But I'm not going to buy anything. We had an opportunity with a sports franchise, and just 10%, if you were putting it down, was like $100 million just to be a minority. That's crazy. I could buy a whole slew of businesses for $100 million.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not going to ever be a minority in anything. I got to be the majority. That's just the way it is, how I operate. And so that's what started my foray into broadcast. And it was perfect, as a writer, as someone who was doing commentary, but having that. And then it took me 2 years to learn the language. I mean, that was a hard curve for me to learn it, to run it, to manage it, dealing with the Federal Communications Commission, dealing with retrans, dealing with the NBC networks and affiliates who you have to take their programming. I mean, it's just, but man, what a game changer. Being a broadcast owner.
What is the biggest thing that changed for you now that you're a broadcast owner? Like, what was the big thing that you're like, wow, my whole life has changed now because of this?
We can decide elections. It's real power. The media has real power. And it's not what you see in the networks with CNN, ABC out of New York. It's what happens in the local market. That's where you make a difference. You can oust school officials. I mean, you can put something on the ballot that could change a community forever. The power, and that's why you have to be a referee. You cannot favor the left or the right. You just have to favor the facts and the truth. That's the only thing that you can be an advocate for. You have to be a neutral arbiter. Even Donald Trump tried to say, when he first won in 2016, had it not been for Sinclair Broadcast Group and their affiliates, he never would be president. Wow. It's a lot of power. I mean, if you read the letters to the editor and the commentary, I mean, even with people, and sometimes when people are doing surveys and ask questions, well, why did you change your mind on this? Well, I was listening to my state, or I listened to Armstrong's commentary and he made me think different. And that's a lot of power. I take that seriously. That's why I try not to promote my agenda. I just promote the facts. And it's so hard because the hardest work you do basically is working on yourself. The hardest work I do every day, 24 hours a day, is working on Armstrong Williams. And literally, I find that at the end of 24 hours, the world improves because I improve. That's what you got to do. You got to keep working on yourself, your ideology, your philosophy, your relationships, your moral striving, because we all get weak. We all are human and can succumb to anything. I don't care what your faith is. I don't care how strong your morals are. There's always something that can slip in. That's why you got to be forever vigilant, man. It's just like freedom. You got to be ever vigilant to keep it, because it can slip away like on a flip of a dime.
You mentioned Trump, and what's his thing called?
Truth Social.
Truth Social. What would he say? Like, he tweeted you, he didn't tweet you. He like truthed you or whatever it's called, thanking you, I think, for like a mention or a piece you did on him, which is really nice. And you mentioned like the ability to really control the minds of kind of like the minority communities, which
not minorities, all communities,
which is, carries a lot of weight. Have you had kind of people come to you and try to convince you to say things or try to push you in a certain direction? And like, how do you manage that? Because from my understanding, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of the revenue stream of any form of media is typically like sponsors or ads or people that want to get the attention, they buy the attention. So how do you control that?
Well, your survival is the local market and the local programming that reflects the market, carrying local sports like football and tennis, kinds of things that people care about. You've got to carry it. And when there are natural disasters, making sure the station is up 24/7, reminding people the dangerous locations and where it's flooding, It's what people depend on. I'm not going to be compromised by money. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to be compromised by sponsors and advertisers. I remember a huge pharmaceutical company had done some numbers and about where they wanted to advertise. They wanted to reach the minority community. Well, instead, so we're mainstream, definitely mainstream. And they realized that we had the best platform, and it was during the era of COVID. And I spoke with the CEO, huge guy, and they said I want to advertise with you, but the problem is we're strong on taking the COVID vaccine, and you've not been vaccinated. You need to get vaccinated so you can keep your money, brother. Because that will, did not, so you keep that money. That will never happen. And about 3 weeks later, they circled back and they decided to sponsor and advertise on our terms. Listen, we all have choices. How much money at the end of the day? Come on. It's about principle, and it's about people trusting your product, and that it's not been tainted, a compromise. Because remember this, the truth has a biological advantage. Doesn't need the artifice of man to survive. It lives and breathes freely on its own. Whatever you do in the darkness and something like that, whether you realize it or not, which you have no control over, it will come to light. And the price that you pay, just like at all these situations, look at all the things that happen, like what happened with Comey and Letitia James and this double standard of going after Trump on mortgage fraud, trying to destroy his businesses in New York because they never thought there was any remote possibility that he would win again. He wins again. It comes full circle because what they were doing in the darkness, and all these files have been founded in these safe places where people were trying, with the Mueller report, they were trying to destroy him. I don't believe in revenge. I don't believe in any of that, but it's understanding when he was elected, this is exactly what he's going to do. He told you what he was going to do. He told you at Charlie Kirk's funeral, I don't forgive my enemies. I hate my enemies. I want to destroy my enemies. I don't agree, but they tried to destroy him. But hate versus hate accomplishes nothing. You end up destroying each other. But that's where we are as a nation. That's why revenge is so dangerous. But they never thought he had a snowball chance of winning again. You have to be very careful because you never know who's going to rise to power. That employee that you cheated out of their money, you disrespect and fired for no reason at all because they had something on you that was the truth. That employee could become the next member of Congress in your district. They could become the next U.S. Never underestimate what people become in life. What you've done has planted the seed for your own undoing. That's why always be about integrity and always be about honor. Then you don't have to worry about those things. You can sleep very well at night.
Wow. That's something we tell people all the time. In our community, the average age we shared with you yesterday, I think it was around 34 years old, which means over the next 25 to 30 years, every single person is going to reach, in one way, shape, or form, some version of the peak of their career. Statistically, most people hit it around, between 50s and 60s. And it's the relationships that start now over the next 20, 25 years that will shape what your connection is going to be when they become who they will become, whether it's business, whether it's politics, whatever it is. And what you just described that is it starts with every single relationship.
Every relationship matters. They're human beings. You never know where people are going in life. You just don't know. I've had stories and see how people transform. Even the rut, the puppy in the litter, where you think that it has no chance, and then it becomes the giant of the adult puppies. It's just the way it is. I respect human beings. I value all human beings because you know what? We're all created in God's image, and we're created in God's image. He gives us all something very special, and we all have gifts. And so I don't want to create unnecessary enemies by harming people, exploiting people, robbing people, just like these investment firms. One of my favorite shows on TV is American Greed. It's horrifying what individuals will do to take someone's money, take their wealth, what they do to senior citizens. It's unconscionable. I couldn't sleep with myself at night. There's just some things, there's some Rubicons I'm just not going to cross. I'm just not. I'm afraid of the consequences. And fear is a good motivator. I just don't need, and it's going to come at the worst time in your life. When you're riding high and all those things that remain hidden, and it just destroys you like a tsunami, wipes you out.
It comes when you least expect it.
At least want it.
Is there, looking back on your journey, and this is incredible. So thank you, Arms. Looking back on your journey, is there one decision or kind of one thing that you did or you feel like you did that if looking back, you wish you hadn't done or you wish you could have done differently?
I don't live with regrets because even in making bad decisions, you learn so much from. In fact, I've learned the best lessons from my struggles in life, things that I should have done differently.
What is one thing you should have done differently, you think?
What should I have done differently?
Like if you can go back now and change one thing, not that you have regret about it, but knowing what you know now, if you could change one thing, you had a magic wand in your hand.
No, I wouldn't change it.
No?
No, would not. No. And no, would not. It all makes you into who you are. What I do, though, is make better decisions going forward and better judgment going forward. Because look, for me, my business is my as a businessman is very interesting, and I don't want anybody to take this the wrong way. Is that I run my businesses. I'm a dictator. Now I will listen to many voices, and if you have a better idea, I will listen to it. I'm not a person that needs to meet with my executives every day. They just have an open door. They just come to me when there's something they cannot figure out or something they want my input on. I don't believe in micromanaging people. I trust people and give them a lot of leeway. But I try to learn every aspect of the business. I read. It's the reason why I think one of the toughest jobs I have in the business is that I sign every check because it helps me keep up with the finances, how things are being spent, where the payroll is. I get a chance to see everything. And so I've seen my accountants make $1 million of mistakes, $1 million mistakes. It happens often.
Wow.
Okay? Often. Not because it's intentional, it's because they're human. And you can talk, you've got to be involved in your business. You got to look at the finances. You got to look at the profits and loss. You got to look at the growth. But I sign checks just so I can manage and keep my arms wrapped around the finances of the business. And sometimes I have to sign maybe 150 checks. More, that's a lot. And I don't do the auto pen like Joe Biden. No, I know. I'm sorry.
You're doing it yourself.
Because if you do an auto pen, you're defeating the purpose.
You're right.
I got to see them. And then I said, did I not sign this check to NBC for $1 million? Because we paid them a lot of money. Didn't I sign this? And sure enough, yeah, because I remember. Yeah, so I have to make that time to do those things to protect my business.
It's so powerful. So many business owners I know avoid the finances because there's a lot of emotion there. Like, what? We're paying this guy what? Or who did this deal? Or what's this check for? And you start to get, there's emotions that come up. And, I'm curious on how, you mentioned potentially sometimes accountants make mistakes, $1 million mistakes.
No, they make mistakes, brother.
Everybody makes mistakes.
No, they make mistakes. Let me tell you this, okay? And they continue to make mistakes, especially when you have a big business and a huge operation. Now, I have different financial offices that pay different bills, which is fine, but there's some bills that I want to see so I can keep a grip on it. But they're going to make mistakes. It's just the way it is. Because sometimes they're not feeling well. Sometimes they're rushed. Sometimes they're dealing with the loss and emotions and they're not functioning. They're human beings. They're just going to make mistakes.
Do you penalize them when they make mistakes? How do you deal with it?
No, by making sure that I sign the checks. I'm like an editor.
You're the last stop.
Yeah, I'm an editor. I may write my columns, which I do, but I have an editor to clean it up and make sure all the statistics and everything is accurate. You got to have a last stop. I'm the last stop.
Wow.
Yes.
So you take all the responsibility. It's never really their fault. If it slips through you were the last stop.
No. A chain is no greater than its weakest link. We all are a team, okay, at the end of the day. And here's the good news. Those mistakes are rare, but yet large numbers. I cannot judge them just by the errors and the mistakes. I've got to look at the whole body of people who've been with me 30 plus years. And for 95% of the time, they've been spot on. Sometimes what we do in life, even in relationships, where somebody may betray or disappoint you and hurt you, that's the only thing you can focus on. When I'm making a decision of whether to sever a relationship that I've invested so much time and so much of my heart and soul into it, I have to sit down and contemplate this and look at the whole body of that relationship. before I make that decision. I usually make the right decision, keeping that relationship. I believe in second chances, even when I've been the victim.
Wow. Where does that come from for you? Where did you learn?
My mother, my Christian faith. Yes, I have to. I take relationships very seriously. I do. And listen, especially with people that are close to you, sometimes it can really tip the scale. And then the other thing I can do is I don't ever want to have a conversation with someone where I've been hurt when I'm mad and angry and hurt. Sometimes I would take a week to see what I could not see. Then I'll come back and say, now let's talk. You should never make a decision when you're angry. Just like your child. You should not beat a child when you're angry. You say, you know, my dad used to tell me, you messed up. I'm not going to whip your butt right now, but I'm coming back to it.
I'll see you next week.
Yeah, I'll see you next week. I learned that from my parents. No.
The pain of waiting the whole week for the beating is worse than the beating.
That's right. Yeah, you got it. So, you know, and then normally what happens, particularly when you're dealing with a relationship, they'll call you, say, you know, Strong, I really appreciate you. Let me just come clean. I messed up. This is what I want to tell you. I want to. They'll come clean. Give them a chance and you got to give people permission to be honest.
Create the space to be safe.
Yes, you got to do that.
We talk a lot about in our community the power of having hard conversations. A lot of people in general, sometimes in business, but also just in life, we know in our heart, in our soul, that there's a hard conversation we need to have. And for whatever reason, we just avoid it. Many of us, we avoid it. We don't want to have the hard conversation because you know, or you think you know, what's on the other side of that conversation. It's not fun. Those conversations are not fun. You seem to be able to just step into those hard conversations every single day. I mean, you welcome it. Is that just something you naturally have, or are you consciously saying, this is a difficult conversation I need to have, but I need to have it, and you go head first into it? How do you approach that feeling? Because I know you get that feeling, but also how important is it to you to address the elephant in the room sometimes with the people closest to you?
Well, it goes back to what we just discussed. You realize the consequences if you don't have the conversation. And so having the conversation is the only course forward. And it's not a tough conversation because oftentimes these conversations have to do with respect, trust, and love. You know, you love people that you can admit you love until they hurt you. And you say to yourself, Army, why are you hurting? And I realized because I cared about this person. You know, people who do things to me, it's so irrelevant to me. But when you have given people permission in your heart and they hurt you, you've got to have that conversation because you know what? If you continue to carry that, it becomes destructive for you and for them and everything around you. It affects everything around you. So you got to tame that tornado and that storm that continues to gather in you. Because if you don't tame it and address it, it's going to continue to gather more storms and it's going to be even more destructive. So you do everybody good when you decide. And then once you start the conversation, because the part is started, but then you start it by saying, look, no matter what happens today, you're my guy, you're my person. It is. I don't know what the outcome is going to be, but I want this to work out where we can be better than before. This is what I want. My goal is not for this to end, is to create a renaissance, a new beginning, a rebirth. Because relationships sometimes need rebirths. And sometimes we don't realize our own antics, what caused that person to do what they did. And sometimes you ask, what did I do? Did I do something that can, because sometimes we can't think we can have any reason why this happened. It has to be somebody else's fault, not my fault. I had nothing to do with this. This is on you. But no, you said, look, tell me, let me see something I cannot see. What did I do? Because this is not you. It's totally out of character. Is it something I did? And then you start there. Instead of focusing on them, you focus on you.
In a way, it's trusting yourself to step into it. On the car ride over here, we spoke a lot about intuition. And you brought up something really powerful that I want to kind of bring back up again on the podcast, is you spoke about that feeling that we all have. And you also tied it back to like lineage, and how all of the years that have brought us to this moment, the DNA, the ancestors, it all led to this moment. And when you're conflicted with a decision or a path to choose, perhaps, or a relationship or a business, whatever it is, there's a feeling that comes up. And that feeling is all the data from all of the years giving you a signal, telling you something. And many of us will try to push that feeling aside and say, I don't want to listen to this right now. I want to drown it out. And you go ahead and you go against your own intuition. And you mentioned how you could potentially buy yourself some time, but eventually it does come full circle. Talk to me a little bit about that intuition and how you use it to make some, huge decisions in your life, and what you think people are missing when it comes to actually listening to the truth, which is the soul, which is the connection, which is what's happening inside of them, and how it's really like the best AI ever is the thousands of years that have brought you to this moment. All that data inside of you is trying to tell you something.
This is a very interesting insight for the younger generation up till about 25. It's very difficult for them to have that.
Mm.
They've not lived long enough. They've not read long enough. They've not studied long enough. They've not traveled enough to have that kind of gut instinct. And that is why you have to be more forgiving, more patient, and more understanding of them than anybody else, because they're going to make these mistakes. They're going to make these judgments. They're going to have a microwave mentality. They're not going to have the loyalty and can measure up to the kinds of expectations that you have. But for those of us who have lived, it's what I call a spiritual currency that we have. We've lived. I remember, I don't know why I'm thinking about this. I remember Winnie Mandela, Nelson Mandela's wife, when I was a young boy in South Africa, running along with her when she was fighting apartheid, and they were shooting at us and fire bombings, and everybody was scared to death. I've seen people necklace burned with a noose necklace, and I'll never forget her saying something to me once. She says, "Wow, you're fearless. You don't fear death." She says, "Where does that come from?" And because before that, I was having conflict with her. But when she saw me in the trenches of war, and I've seen a lot, the trenches of war, she says, "Let me develop that." Mm. And so through that, and through the things that I've experienced in life, in this spiritual currency, I can have someone for a very important position that my senior staff will bring in the room for me to interview. And before they walk through the door, a wind will blow through me, and it's so dark. And when the person is sitting there, they say all the right things. They have all the right personality. They're gregarious, but I already know I can't hire them. And I sit there and I cannot tell you, and then my staff think I've lost my mind, And then 2 or 3 years later, this person, an accountant, robbed this company blind, set up a system, and that was that same person. Or you can hire some attractive woman, and the men are just spellbound by her, and you're just captivated by her. And they tell you all the right things, but then you realize you don't know what it is that does not add up, but you give them a chance because you can't figure it out. But but then you realize I need to be on it, but you hire them. And then all of a sudden, that same feeling, the same feeling of that wind blowing, the wind of change is blowing, telling you it's time for this person to go. It's that wind. And you got to listen to that wind. And you have a great relationship with the person, but there are things that are hidden that you just don't know. And you have to make that tough decision. Said, I think we need to part ways. And they ask, what have I done wrong? It's not what you've done wrong. It's what you will do. But what you realize once you let that person go and you begin to unearth things, you see what they've been doing. Those are tough decisions. Following your gut, because people ask you, why? Tell me why. Everything cannot be explained. That's what people don't understand. Everything doesn't need an explanation because you yourself don't understand it. And you got to be humble enough to say, I don't have the answers now. I just know we need to part company.
Wow.
Yes.
So powerful. Do you think that as a young entrepreneur listening to this, you have to go through those difficult times to then learn and develop that intuition?
Well, your generation is much more sophisticated, much more intelligent, much more savvy than we were coming along. Technology and social media has advanced you into a form of AI that is unprecedented. But the problem is, the soul is not there. You know, people talk about cloning ghosts and cloning human beings. You can clone many things, but if you don't clone this, you can't clone the soul. That's the conscience of a person. That's where truth and character and honor lies.
Right.
So you can have all the things that you have. You can have the brilliance, you can have everything, but if your soul is not intact, you don't have a conscience, and you can do unconscionable things in life. You can be cold. It doesn't even bother you.
Right.
Yeah. They lack the feeling of the things that they're doing. And that's the price you pay. There is no moral compass.
It's so true. You know, oftentimes we speak about our, you know, I go on a lot of podcasts and I speak about the journey, and some things just don't make sense. And recently I've been saying, I think we're just a soulpreneur. And people say, well, you have a business partner. I don't mean like SOL. There's a U in there, you know, and we're soulpreneurs. The reason why this works and the reason why people gravitate towards us is because our soul is in it. There's an energy that not only do we believe, and are we perfect? Absolutely not. But we're all in, kind of the mind, body, the whole soul is in it. I feel every aspect of the business, and I feel every aspect of every relationship. And one thing when I, you know, look at you and what I admire so much is I know you're very much the same. You guide yourself based on the feelings that you have, based on the connection. And candidly, sometimes it's a lot. Sometimes there's so many feelings, and sometimes there's so much that your soul is pulling you in so many different directions. And when I hear about your morning routine, when I hear about how you structure your day, I think now, like even selfishly myself, is like, I also have a morning routine. I also go about my day in a certain way, but there's levels to it, because the stronger you are with preparing yourself, the more you can handle, the bigger your vessel is in terms of your soul. Do you feel at times that you're a little bit off?
Well, listen, you cannot, I've learned from my young age to my age of peace, is that I don't want to invest in things that are fleeting. You see, it's not happiness.
What does that mean? Invest into things that are
I'm
fleeting.
gonna tell you.
Yeah.
See, it's not happiness that I see. People love to talk about happy and that's epic, and they use these words. It's peace that I want at the end of the day. Listen, look, I could have sex and be happy in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
But what do I have to show for it the next morning? What does it do for my soul unless it's my wife? You know, what does I have to show for it? What's the meaning of it? What do I have to show for from a year to day? You know, people like to do things that gives them immediate gratification. Why do people lie? It robs people immediately of the truth. Why do they steal? It robs people immediately of their goods. Why do you want a virgin, or why do you want to have sex? Because it's fresh, it's pure. But once it loses flavor, once it loses its newness, and everybody says, I stretched that too, then it no longer has the power that it once has. That's why young women should be very careful in what they give of themselves, because they build a reputation. And plus, men like to brag. You know, that's what they like to do. And it's just like one thing about me. I've never in my life ever discussed with my friends or my family who I've slept with. Never. That is so private and so sacred. But to people today, it's a sport. It's true. It's a sport.
It's so true.
It's what it is. Oh, I slept up. For me, because that is that is to me something that's very private, very sick, that I don't have those discussions with. I leave it to you to assume. Okay, I don't have those conversations because I think it's so disrespectful. So what we have to do, we have to sacrifice a lesser good for a greater good. Intimacy is great if it's for the greater good, if it lasts, it sustains itself, you know, instead of you cheapening it. And that's what we've done. We've cheapened a lot of the things that are meaningful and that are empowering, and that gives us the sense of the fullness of who a person really is. And so what I try to do is do things that last, not things that gives me immediate gratification. And so that's the kind of world that we find ourselves in. You know, if somebody curses me out, it's easy for me to try to find words to be right back at them. But a man of peace and stability don't have to say anything. Not everything requires a reply, an answer. Sometimes we need to understand the power of silence, because silence speaks volumes that people don't understand. You don't always have to yell back. It's just like when I was growing up with my parents, I was watching my brothers. Sometimes they would talk back, and my brothers once asked me, why don't you have a... I said, because they're not going anywhere. They're going to be here, okay? And I can't win. This is their house and not mine. I've watched you, and always circle back to why I'm going to waste my energy on something. This is their house. I need to respect it until I get my own. So I never engaged in arguing and bickering with my parents, because the Bible says, honor thy father and thy mother, that the Lord, and so the days that are put in the land that the Lord thy God giveth thee will be long. And so I've always honored my parents. I never got in the battle. And I pick and choose my battles, you know, because people are so on the edge today. They carry so many wounds. So many people are wounded today, and they want to lash out. And then sometimes you lash out by not saying, and when you don't say something, people weeks later they'll call you and say, can we talk? You got to give people the permission to work out whatever it is. And remember, every human being is enduring something. There's some burden that somebody carries. Nobody gets a free ride in this country. And everybody needs someone that they need to be connected to. Relationships are so important to people. And right now, because a lot of people are not growing up with fathers, there's so much conflict in the world. Everybody, it's just like the umbilical cord. Something happens very powerful when a mother gives birth. The child is disconnected.
Keep going.
The child is disconnected from that umbilical cord. And what that child will do, to try to find connection in that love and that stability of plugging the drugs, they're plugging the sex, they're plugging the crime, they're plugging the greed, they're plugging the gambling, because they're still trying to find meaning and peaceful and stability in their life. And it's not until you plug into God and good living that you find peace in your life. You find peace in doing good, not in catering to the things that further corrupts you.
Wow. That is so special. A lot of young entrepreneurs listening to this right now are asking themselves, what is one thing that I can be doing right now to take me 1 inch closer, 1% better? Because what you're saying is so true. Everyone's got demons. Everyone's got to choose between short-term gratification, long-term gratification, what they're connected to. It's these micro decisions that really affect the trajectory of your life. The young entrepreneur doing really well, listening to this right now, trying to take away one thing that they can kind of add to their life that you think would potentially benefit the trajectory of where they're going in terms of mind, body, business, being successful, being happy, being at peace, which is a very big word. What do you think is one thing they need to consider right now?
Reading more. Not easy reading like periodicals online. You got to read the great classics. The classics like Marcus Aurelius, Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis, Mere Christian by C.S. Lewis, the letters of Frederick Douglass when he was a slave, just the Socrates and even Friedrich Nietzsche, who he once said, God is dead. And that's not what he said. It's just how the media interpreted it and make you believe that. Just read about those great novels and these great books. It's just something about reading about classics, what happened with Plato and Socrates and Aristotle and the things that the Greeks perfected, even though their morality and their occupation with perverted sex was a preoccupation. Still, but they were able to conquer that. That's why Constantinople came along. But to read those classics, those books, I read those books and the Bible. Those books do more to give me moral clarity, because in all that you do, what we need is moral clarity. And there's nothing like the classics that I go back and read. It just feeds my soul. I'm reading this book, Grasshopper, now. Just a great book.
Who's it by?
I'll tell you, the author, it's Grasshopper. The author.
What's it about?
It's about the trials of life. It's about entrepreneurship. It's about navigating the different challenges that one have in life, but yet you always come back to your sense of self and your self-identity, because so many people believe they have to be someone else to be accepted. They cannot be who they are and what they are. They feel they have to become something else, and what they don't realize, they're living a life of misery because they feel that's what people expect of them. That's what they project. You got to be happy with who you are and improve that which you are, not change who you are.
Wow. That's one thing I find so interesting about you, is your ability to remain authentic no matter what. And being in media, being in the political world, having power, having a lot of friends that have a lot of power, you never seem to compromise your own beliefs. You never seem to want to show up as potentially something less or more popular. Since the day I've met you, you've had the same beliefs. You always push the facts. You're always doing research. And I find that a lot of people, it's very difficult to do, because sometimes the tide does change and what you believe in might not be so popular. The COVID vax, clearly one of them. You're very outward with your views and with who you support. And you also question who you support, which I think is also really powerful. Is you're not a blind follower. You're a very informed, I would say, like, you question everything.
Well, let me just say this to you. An unexamined life, as well as an unexamined political philosophy, is not worth leading and following. Just because I visited my physician a year ago and he gave me a perfect bill of health does not mean that that's what's going to happen a year later. We must constantly do inventory of ourselves. And it doesn't matter to me how much I've invested in my political philosophy. If someone takes me to a higher truth, it is the truth that I seek, not to be right. It is the truth. So if you show me a higher truth, I would abandon that philosophy in a heartbeat for the higher truth. The problem is, so many have invested so much in their ideology, even when they know it's wrong, when they hear a higher truth, they refuse to abandon, and therefore they refuse to grow. And so that is, to me, is what separates me. And even with, you mentioned with my friends, you know, they want you to be corrupted in many ways because you normalize them. And they don't have to adhere to the same standard that you don't realize you put pressure on them. So they will tempt you. But they also want you to measure up, because you said something very important at the very start of this conversation. It's too good to be true. This cannot be real. Because we live in a society today where goodness cannot be real. Because we believe everybody's corrupt, everybody's dishonest, everybody lies, everybody has their little secret skeletons in their closet, and nobody's who they are. We don't believe good men exist anymore unless it's in our parents, our grandparents. So that's what you were saying. It just cannot be true. But goodness does still live if you seek it out. And realizing that people see good in you, you have more of a deeper moral obligation to be honest, that when you're flawed or when you fall short, you remind them, I'm human too, but I always strive for the greater good. Okay. And even though I may know what the truth is, I may still give in to that sin and that poison pill. It doesn't mean that I'm imperfect or I'm just like everybody. It's just that I fell in that moment, but my goal is to still strive, because people don't remember that the 80% of the things that you got right. They remember all the 20% of what you got wrong. And that's what they judge you by.
It's so true. Wow. I want to get into art a little bit, because I know you're probably the largest art collector I've ever met, hands down, undisputed. You have your own museums. And yesterday you were educating us on the art of art. And you mentioned how art is, you'll have the quote, something around the connection between art and the soul. And I believe that with music. You know, I can sometimes be in a bad mood even, or I'm not feeling my best. And I know, okay, I'm going to put this song on. That song plays 30 seconds into the song. I'm starting to feel good. It awakens the soul again. It plays to the tune of the soul. And you see that very same connection with physical art, whether it's a painting, whether it's an incredible mask with this human hair that you showed us that you're building. Talk to me about the connection of art and why it's so important to you. Because some people have, you know, a piece of art in their house maybe, or a couple pieces. Not too many people collect the way you collect.
You know, art cleanses the dust from our souls. And it reminds us of the human odyssey of struggle. And the different genres reminds us of not only the cruelty of man, but how man can be triumphant as well. It reminds us of the beginning of the formation of humankind. And when you go to these caves where human beings could not communicate through writing, they use drawings of animals and of creeks and different things to remind you of what their history was, or they show you tombs of how the people died of a spear where they're fighting each other. Human beings were communicating before we even had the form of writing, because a lot of history is distorted. You know, I collect this art from the diaspora, which showed the suffering and the humiliation of the slave trade and the masters, and they had the slave chained together around the neck, and they showed the blood just streaking away, and you could almost go to that place. And what it reminds you, whether it's slavery in the United States, whether it's the Holocaust, because I visited Auschwitz and Dachau recently, is that human beings don't change much. You know, sometimes when I'm flying and I can be 42,000 feet in the air, I say to myself, mankind is constructive, but equally and more destructive. Art reminds us of our place in history and the gifts that people had that are just ingenious before they had technology, before they had AI, before they had instruments. I mean, you look at how they were able to form these pyramids, and it's just, you just find it, it's amazing what human beings were able to do. Whether it's what Michelangelo was able to do with the Sistine Chapel, art feeds us. It feeds us to our highest place of what we can become. And it doesn't discriminate. Mankind has this hierarchy of discrimination. Art doesn't discriminate. Either you have the gift or you don't have it. And it doesn't matter where you are in the world, they create this art about their culture, about their circumstances, and they leave behind making sure that whether the records of history recorded or not, history through their art, through their genius, whether it may have taken them decades as a village to create it, reminds us of the struggle of mankind that is often left out the annals of history.
Wow. Oh, I love your ability to storytell. I think it's the most, you know, I believe that humans don't necessarily interact just on a human to human basis. We always connect through the magic and through the stories. And the stories is what brings people together. It's what forms communities. It's what builds trust. It's what in some ways decides elections. It's all about these stories because they evoke emotion. They create a fire or fear or energy.
Or sadness.
Or sadness.
A lot of art can bring about sadness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes the best pieces of art are from the darkest times ever.
Yeah, it's true.
Because it's the motivation to sit there and really feel it.
And see, that's the thing about what I find, particularly with African art, when I first started collecting, it had feelings to it. It had a soul to it. Had a spirit to it. There's a spiritual dimension to it that I had not felt before in other art. You could feel the toils and the labor that went into developing the piece, because they didn't have access to the finest tools. They had to use what was around them in nature to create the not only the tools to carve it, but from the dirt and from the wood itself to create that. It's just, to me, it's just absolutely remarkable. It reminds you that there's got to be a God somewhere and a greater purpose to all our lives. It reminds us what they were able to do with literal nothing, living in the worst times, but what they were able to create with their minds, because they did not allow their minds to be consumed by the anger and the stress of watching loved ones die, or sold off in slavery, or being burned in some oven in the Holocaust. They found something in the art to make sure that it would be something that somebody could pass along from those experiences, to remind people that this should never happen again, and pleading for the best of all of us.
I love that. Arms, one thing we always do at the end of this podcast, is my favorite thing, is we give you the opportunity to bring a younger version of yourself. You can choose the age. So some people go and bring in 5-year-old Aaron here, 6-year-old. You choose the age, okay? And we were to bring this younger version. How old are you thinking right now? Where are you going right now? I can see your brain turning. Where are you going?
17.
Okay, so we're bringing 17-year-old Armstrong Williams. We're pulling up a chair to the front of this table right now. And he's sitting here. And you have the opportunity now, as the version of yourself, to share one message with 17-year-old Armstrong Williams. One message. What would that message be?
You know, when I was 17, I never thought my parents would die. The best part of my life, the conversations, riding on the back of the truck, going to the beach together, sitting at their feet, listening to their wisdom, and just laughing. The last thing that could have ever been on my mind, that the day would come that they would no longer be with me. It is the one thing that I've never been able to come to terms with. And I'll say to anybody, if you have your mother and father, you have the greatest gift you cannot ever imagine. No one can ever tell you. You can attend no funeral or no ceremony that can ever make you feel the loss of when you begin to lose your parents. And when you lose your father, that is the time when a man becomes a man. And so I would tell you, cherish your parents, enjoy every moment, every split second, because believe me, they won't always be here. And make them proud and let them see your success and the values they poured into you during their lifetime. Because listen, when they're gone, there's a hole that can never be filled.
If we were able to create a window and you were able to share one message with both of your parents right now, what is one thing you'd want to say to them?
No message. I live what they expected of us every day, along with my brothers and sisters. My parents would be very pleased. No message.
Wow. And lastly, one message with the people listening that maybe we didn't cover, that maybe you didn't get a chance to share. One message you want everyone listening to really take away from Armstrong Williams. Most people will never get to meet Armstrong Williams. You can see him on social. You can follow him. Goes live every morning. But in this moment, they've listened to nearly 2 hours. This incredible story. Was one message you want to leave them with?
No message. Nothing I want to add or take away from the conversation today. It's all there.
Wow. Arms, you're not only an amazing friend, you're an amazing example of what it means to maintain and to be in friendship and to be in connection and to be in relationship. More than you know, myself, Landon, Ryan, all the people we've introduced you to in our circle, all the people you've introduced us in your circle. I think you will never really be able to grasp just the influence you've had and the positive light you've been in our life, the ability for us to know that we have someone like you who not only believes in us, but shows up, takes a flight from DC to Miami, cancels all their plans just to be here, be with us, to give more than you take, and it means the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Founder to Founder podcast. And I have one favor, just one favor to ask. It's the only favor I'll ever ask from you. And if you liked what you listened to please like, subscribe, and please just leave a comment. Let us know what you think. how we can make it better. We are all in on delivering value to you, and all we ask in return is that you hit that subscribe. It goes a long way for what we're trying to build here. And as always, we post an episode every single Wednesday, so stay tuned, and thank you for tuning in.